The Velan Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships moved through space like silver ghosts, carrying the flag of conquest to every corner of the spiral arm. Over 300 species bowed before them. Some had surrendered peacefully. Most had not. It did not matter. In the end, all knelt before the Velan. High Sovereign Kethmer sat upon his throne on the capital world of Velan Prime. He was old. Even by Velan standards, his gray skin marked with the ceremonial scars of 100 victories. He had crushed rebellions, burned worlds, and built monuments from the bones of those who defied him. The galaxy knew his name and trembled. On a small observation post at the edge of known space, a young analyst named Tilish stared at his screen with growing confusion. He was nobody important. Just another worker processing sensor data from the frontier. His job was simple. Watch the empty spaces between stars and report anything unusual. Today, something was very unusual. The planet was called Sol 3 in the ancient records. A small blue world orbiting a yellow star in a system that nobody cared about. The original survey had been conducted 8,000 years ago, back when the Empire was still young and hungry. The report had been short and dismissive. Primitive bipeds, pre-agricultural, no technology, no threat, no value. Till Osh pulled up the old survey images. He saw creatures covered in hair, living in caves, hunting animals with pointed sticks. They were unremarkable in every way. The galaxy was full of such species, slowly crawling toward intelligence over millions of years. Most never made it. They died in ice ages or asteroid impacts, or simply faded away into extinction. But now his sensors were telling him something impossible. Sol-3 was emitting electromagnetic signals, radio waves, television broadcasts, and most disturbing of all, concentrated energy signatures that looked very much like nuclear reactions. In 8,000 years, the primitive cave dwellers had somehow developed technology. This was not supposed to happen. Not this fast. The Velan had studied the evolution of intelligence across thousands of worlds. Species took millions of years to develop. These creatures had done it in less than 10,000. It was wrong. It was unnatural. Tilish wrote his report carefully. He recommended immediate reconnaissance, updated surveys, perhaps even preemptive action, before these fast-developing creatures became a problem. His superior, Commander Veth, read the report and laughed. "You want me to waste resources on some backwater planet?" Veth said, his sharp teeth showing in what passed for a Velan smile. "We have real problems. The Krell are making noise again. The tribute ships from the outer sectors are late. And you want me to worry about primitives?" "Sir, the rate of their development is unprecedented," Tilish tried to explain. "If they continue at this pace, then we will deal with them," Veth interrupted. "Like we deal with everyone. Now get back to work and stop wasting my time with nonsense." Tilish returned to his station, but he saved a copy of his report. Something told him it would be important someday. Far across the galaxy, on the blue planet that the Velan had dismissed, humanity was taking its first steps into the stars. The E-Spectre floated in the darkness beyond Neptune, running final system checks before the greatest journey in human history. It was not a large ship by the standards that would come later, just 200 meters long, carrying a crew of 42 brave souls who had volunteered to leave everything behind for the unknown. Captain Park Yuna stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the main viewport. She was 43 years old, a veteran of the Korean Space Force, and the first person chosen to command humanity's maiden voyage beyond the solar system. The weight of that responsibility sat heavy on her shoulders, but she did not let it show. A captain could not afford to show doubt. "All systems green, Captain," reported Han Do-hyun, her chief science officer. He was a quiet man with gentle eyes, more comfortable with equations than people. But there was no one better at understanding the strange physics that made their faster-than-light drive possible. The drive itself was an accident. 60 years ago, a team of physicists at a laboratory in Daejeon had been conducting experiments with high-energy particles. Something went wrong. Or perhaps something went very right. The explosion had destroyed the laboratory, killed 3 researchers, and opened a hole in space itself. A door to somewhere else. It took decades to understand what had happened. More decades to control it. But humanity had finally learned to fold space, to step from one point in the universe to another without crossing the distance between. They called it the fold drive, and it was humanity's ticket to the stars. Communications? Park Yuna asked. "Ready, Captain," said Choi Min-jae, her communications officer. He was young and eager, barely 30, with the kind of optimism that had not yet been worn down by experience. "Earth is standing by for our final transmission before jump." Park Yuna nodded. "Send it. Tell them we are ready." The message traveled at the speed of light, taking hours to reach Earth. By the time it arrived, the Baekdu would already be gone, jumping to a star system 12 light-years away. If everything went well, they would explore, document, and return home as heroes. If something went wrong, they would simply never come back. And humanity would try again with another ship and another crew. "Jump in 5 minutes, Han Do-yoon announced. Park Yuna looked around her bridge at her crew. These were good people. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, dreamers. They had left behind families and homes and everything they knew because they believed in something bigger than themselves. She would not fail them. "All hands," she said into the ship-wide communicator. "Prepare for jump. We are about to make history." The Baekdu's fold drive hummed to life, bending space around the small human ship. In a flash of light that briefly outshone the distant sun, they vanished from the solar system. Somewhere across the galaxy, a young Velen analyst felt a chill run down his spine. He did not know why. He would find out soon enough. The Baekdu emerged from fold space in a flash of blue light. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the sensors came alive with data, and the crew began to cheer. They had done it. 12 light-years from Earth, orbiting a red dwarf star that humans had named Proxima. The first interstellar voyage was complete. Park Yuna allowed herself a small smile. History would remember this moment. Humanity would remember this moment. "Begin full sensor sweep," she ordered. "I want to know everything about this system." Han Do-yoon worked quickly, his fingers dancing across his console. 4 planets detected. 2 gas giants, 1 rocky world in the habitable zone, 1 small ice world in the outer system. The rocky planet shows signs of liquid water and a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. "Captain, it could support life." The bridge fell silent. A world that could support life. After centuries of looking up at the stars and wondering if they were alone, humanity might finally have its answer. "Take us closer," Park Yuna said. Carefully, the Baekdu moved deeper into the system, its sensors reaching out like curious fingers. Choi Min-jae monitored the communications bands, listening for any sign of intelligent signals. Han Do-hyun analyzed the planetary data. Chief Tactical Officer Kwon Ji-ae kept watch on the ship's defensive systems. Just in case it was Kwon Ji-ae who saw them first. "Contact!" she shouted, her voice sharp with alarm. Multiple contacts, bearing 047. They just appeared out of nowhere. Park Yuna spun toward the tactical display. 3 objects had materialized in space, less than 1,000 kilometers away. They were ships. Massive ships, each one at least 5 times the size of the Baekdu. Their hulls were silver and smooth, without any visible seams or weapons ports. They looked like nothing humanity had ever built. They came out of some kind of faster-than-light travel, Han Do-yun reported, his voice trembling slightly. Different from our fold drive. Some kind of hyperspace tunnel, maybe? Can we communicate? Park Yuna asked. Choi Min-jae shook his head. I am receiving a signal from them, but I cannot decode it. Their language, their technology, everything is completely alien. On the lead Velen cruiser, Commander Veth stared at the strange little ship with a mixture of confusion and contempt. It was ugly, primitive. Its hull radiated waste heat in a pattern that suggested terribly inefficient engines. Its design showed no understanding of proper naval architecture. It was, in short, exactly what he would expect from a newly spacefaring species that had not yet learned its place in the galaxy. Identify them, he ordered. His sensor officer worked for a moment, then looked up with surprise. Commander, according to our database, this ship originates from Sol 3, the primitive world. Veth's eyes narrowed. Solta 3. He remembered that report from the young analyst. The one he had dismissed. Perhaps he should have paid more attention. But it did not matter. These creatures had clearly stumbled upon faster-than-light travel by accident. Such things happened occasionally. The Empire had protocols for dealing with newly emerged species. Send the standard subjugation broadcast, Veth ordered. The message that reached the Baekdu was simple, even after the ship's AI managed to decode it. Surrender immediately. Submit to Velen authority. Prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in destruction. Park Yuna read the translation twice, making sure she understood. Then she turned to face her crew. Their faces showed fear, confusion, and anger in equal measure. They had come to explore, to discover, to make peaceful contact with other intelligent beings. Instead, they had found conquerors. Recommendations? She asked. We could try to negotiate, Choi Min-jae suggested. Explain that we mean no harm, that we are explorers. They do not seem interested in negotiation, Kwon Jie replied grimly. Their weapons are powered up. They are ready to fire. Han Do-yun looked up from his console. Captain, I have been analyzing their technology. Their ships are more advanced than ours in many ways. But their tactical systems seem rigid, predictable. I do not think they have faced serious opposition in a very long time. Park Yuna considered her options. She could surrender, save her crew, let humanity become another conquered species in whatever empire these creatures had built. Or she could fight, risk everything on the slim chance that human courage and creativity could overcome alien technology and numbers. It was not really a choice at all. Initiate First Contact Protocol Delta, she ordered. Choi Min-jae, broadcast medical greetings on all frequencies. Bias time. Kwon Jie, prepare defensive systems, but do not fire unless fired upon. Han Do-hyun, find me a weakness. The crew moved with desperate efficiency. On the Velen ships, Commander Veth watched the alien vessel with growing impatience. Why were they not surrendering? Did they not understand the situation? They are broadcasting something, his communications officer reported. Mathematical sequences. Prime numbers. Geometric ratios. What is the point of this? Veth demanded. Unknown, Commander. Perhaps it is some kind of cultural ritual. Veth had no patience for alien rituals. He ordered a warning shot. A plasma bolt fired across the bow of the human ship. It was a standard intimidation tactic. Usually, species surrendered immediately after seeing the power of Velen weapons. The humans did not surrender. Instead, their ugly little ship did something impossible. It moved. Not just moved, but danced through space with a speed and agility that should have torn it apart. The plasma bolt missed by a wide margin, and then the humans fired back. It was not a weapon Veth recognized. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, invisible to the eye but devastating to electronics. It hit all three Velen cruisers simultaneously, passing through their shields like they were not there, and every system on his bridge went dark. Veth sat in silence, surrounded by the whispers of his terrified crew. In 500 years of naval service, he had never experienced anything like this. His weapons were offline. His engines were dead. His mighty cruiser was nothing but a floating piece of metal dot through the darkness. He heard his communications officer speak one last time. "Commander, the aliens are leaving." They transmitted a message before they jumped. What did it say? The officer's voice shook. "We come in peace. Attack us again, and we will not be so gentle." The Baekdu vanished in a flash of light, leaving three crippled Velen cruisers drifting in the darkness. Commander Veth stared at the empty space where the alien ship had been. For the first time in his long life, he understood what it felt like to be prey. The news spread through the Velen Empire like fire through dry grass. Three cruisers, crewed by veterans, armed with the finest weapons the Empire could build, had been defeated by a single primitive ship. Not destroyed, which would have been understandable. War brought losses, but disabled, humiliated, left floating helpless in space while the enemy simply flew away. High Sovereign Kethmer received the report in his throne room, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. His ancient face showed no emotion as he read, but those who knew him well could see the cold fury building behind his eyes. "Explain this to me," he said quietly. "Explain how three of my warships were defeated by creatures we classified as primitives 8,000 years ago." No one wanted to speak. Finally, Admiral Tarek stepped forward. He was the youngest admiral in the fleet, ambitious and hungry, eager to prove himself. "It was a fluke, High Sovereign," he said confidently. "Commander Veth underestimated the enemy. He was careless. Give me 40 ships, and I will erase these humans from existence. There will be nothing left but dust and memory." Kethmer studied the young admiral for a long moment. "You are certain?" "Completely, High Sovereign. These primitives may have stumbled upon some clever tricks, but tricks cannot defeat the might of the Velen Empire. They are insects. I will crush them beneath my heel." The High Sovereign nodded slowly. "Then go. Take the second fleet. Find their homeworld. Destroy them utterly. I want no survivors, no records, no evidence that they ever existed." Admiral Tarek bowed deeply. "It will be done, High Sovereign." As the Admiral left to gather his forces, Kethmer turned to look out the great window of his throne room. Below him, the capital city stretched to the horizon, a monument to Velen power and glory. Beyond that, the stars themselves bowed to his will. But somewhere in those stars, something new had appeared, something that did not bow. And for the first time in centuries, Kethmer felt a tiny seed of doubt take root in his heart. Far across the galaxy, the Baekdu emerged from fold space in Earth orbit. The journey home had taken 3 jumps, each one a desperate race against time. Captain Park Yuna did not know if the aliens could track them, did not know if a fleet was already on its way to Earth. She only knew that humanity needed to be warned. The United Earth Council convened within hours. Leaders from every nation gathered in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva, their faces pale with shock as Park Yuna delivered her report. She held nothing back. The massive alien ships, the subjugation demand, the battle, if it could be called that. "We have made first contact," she concluded, "and the news is not good. There is an empire out there, a powerful one, and they see us as nothing more than primitives to be conquered." Secretary General Bei Sunho was a calm man, known for his steady leadership during the worst crises. But even his voice wavered slightly as he spoke. "What are our options, Captain?" "As I see it, we have 2 choices," Park Yuna replied. "We can surrender, Accept whatever fate they have planned for us. Become slaves or subjects or whatever it is they do with the species they conquer. She paused. Or we can fight. The assembly erupted in arguments. Some demanded immediate surrender, arguing that humanity could not possibly defeat an interstellar empire. Others called for war, for resistance at any cost. The debate raged for hours. Finally, a quiet voice cut through the noise. It was Dr. Shin Yunji, the xenosociologist who had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life. She had been analyzing the intercepted Velen communications since the Baekdu returned. "If I may," she said, "I have some information that might help with this decision." The assembly fell silent. Dr. Shin activated a holographic display showing decoded Velen records. "The Velen Empire has existed for 12,000 years, she explained. In that time, they have conquered over 300 species. Not one has successfully resisted. Not one has maintained independence. They do not negotiate. They do not accept equals. In their view, there are only two kinds of beings in the universe, Velen and everyone else." She changed the display to show images of conquered worlds. Cities in ruins, populations in chains, monuments of alien civilizations ground to dust. "This is what happens to those who surrender," she said. "Their cultures are erased. Their histories are forgotten. Their people are reduced to servants and slaves. The Velen do not show mercy to the weak. They despise weakness. They respect only one thing." "What?" Bei Sinho asked. "Strength," Dr. Shin replied. "Power, the ability to fight back. If we surrender, they will destroy everything we are. But if we fight, if we prove that we are not easy prey, then perhaps there is a chance for something else." The vote was taken an hour later. It was unanimous. Humanity would fight Dot in the shipyards orbiting Mars. Chief Engineer Ru Taiyang received his new orders with a grim smile. He had been building exploration ships, vessels designed for science and discovery. Now he would build something different. Warships, weapons, tools of survival. He gathered his team around him, thousands of engineers and workers who had dedicated their lives to reaching the stars. "We have a new mission," he told them. "We have met our neighbors, and they want to kill us. They think we are weak. They think we are primitive. They think we will be easy to conquer." He looked around at their determined faces. "Let us show them how wrong they are." The shipyards roared to life. Designs were drawn, tested, and refined. New technologies were developed. The electromagnetic pulse that had disabled the Velen cruisers was improved and weaponized. The fold drive was made faster and more reliable. Armor was strengthened. Sensors were enhanced out, and at the center of it all, the first of the Halcyon-class heavy cruisers began to take shape. It was beautiful and terrible, a ship built for one purpose, to defend humanity's home. 3 months later, Admiral Torek's Second Fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system. 40 Velen warships, the pride of the Empire, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Their sensors swept the system, searching for the pathetic human homeworld. They found it quickly enough, a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star. They also found something else that the Baekdu was waiting for them, accompanied by 2 newly completed Halcyon cruisers and a swarm of smaller defense craft. It was a tiny force compared to the Velen Armada. By any reasonable calculation, it should have been nothing more than a minor obstacle. Admiral Torek smiled as he studied the human fleet. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let us give them one chance to surrender before we destroy them." Captain Park Yuna's face appeared on his screen. She looked calm, too calm. "Admiral," she said, "this is our home. Leave now, and there will be peace. Attack, and you will learn why humanity has survived." Tarek laughed. "Survived? Your species is barely out of its caves. You have no idea what survival means, but you are about to learn." He closed the channel and turned to his fleet commander. "All ships, attack formation. Show these primitives what the Velen Empire does to those who defy us." The 40 warships began to move forward, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Park Yuna watched them come. Her hand was steady as she activated the fleet-wide communicator. "All ships," she said quietly, "weapons free, for Earth." The Battle of Sol had begun. The first wave of Velen plasma bolts lit up the darkness of space like angry stars. Admiral Tarek watched from his flagship with satisfaction. This was how wars were supposed to be fought. Overwhelming firepower. Superior numbers. The enemy crushed before they could even respond. But something was wrong. The human ships were not where his weapons were aimed. They had moved, scattering in patterns that his targeting computers could not predict. The plasma bolts struck empty space while the human vessels danced through the gaps like leaves in the wind. "Recalculate firing solutions," Tarek ordered, his voice tight with annoyance. "Lock onto their engine signatures and fire again." The second volley fared no better. The humans seemed to know exactly where the shots would land before they were even fired. Their small ships wove through the deadly rain of energy, always one step ahead. On the bridge of the Baekdu, Captain Park Yuna watched the tactical display with fierce concentration. Beside her, the ship's artificial intelligence system Hannah processed thousands of data points every second, analyzing Velen firing patterns and predicting their next moves. "Their targeting is predictable," Hannah reported. "They follow standard mathematical trajectories. No variation. No adaptation. They have never needed to adapt," Park Yuna replied. "No one has ever fought back." She opened a channel to her fleet. "All ships, execute pattern Delta. Let us show them something new." The human fleet suddenly changed direction, moving as one, splitting into smaller groups that circled around the Velen formation. It was a tactic as old as human warfare itself, used by horse archers on ancient steppes and fighter pilots in world wars. Surround the enemy. Strike from multiple directions. Never let them focus their firepower. Admiral Tarek had never seen anything like it. His doctrine called for direct engagement, line against line, strength against strength. This swirling chaos of movement and misdirection made no sense to him. "Concentrate fire on the largest ship," he ordered. "Destroy their leader, and the rest will fall." The Velen fleet turned its attention to the Baekdu. Hundreds of plasma bolts streaked toward the human flagship. Park Yuna did not flinch. "All point defense systems activate," she commanded. "Hannah, calculate intercept trajectories." The Baekdu's defense systems came alive. Small railguns fired thousands of projectiles per second, creating a wall of metal that intercepted incoming fire. Energy shields flared as plasma bolts struck and dispersed harmlessly. The ship shook with impacts, but held firm, and then the humans struck back. The first missiles were almost invisible, moving at speeds that Velen sensors could barely track. They did not aim for the heavily armored hulls of the warships. Instead, they targeted engines, weapon systems, sensor arrays. Weak points that Velen engineers had never bothered to protect because no enemy had ever gotten close enough to exploit them. The forward destroyer group died in 11 seconds. 6 ships, each one crewed by hundreds of Velen warriors, reduced to burning wreckage. Admiral Tarek stared at the destruction in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." The humans pressed their advantage. Lieutenant Munhajan led a squadron of small fighters through the chaos, weaving between the massive Velen warships. His craft was damaged, trailing smoke from a near miss that had torn through his left wing. Warning lights flashed across his console. His engine was failing. He had maybe 2 minutes before his ship became a floating coffin. He looked at the tactical display and saw the Velen flagship directly ahead. The massive ship was directing the enemy fleet, coordinating their fire. If it fell, the Velen would lose their command structure. Munhajin made his choice. He pushed his damaged fighter to maximum speed, ignoring the screaming alarms, ignoring the pain in his chest where shrapnel had cut through his flight suit. The Velen point defense systems tried to track him, but he was moving too fast, too unpredictably. For Earth, he said quietly as his fighter struck the flagship's engine core. The explosion tore through the massive ship. Secondary explosions followed as fuel lines and weapon magazines ignited. Admiral Torek had just enough time to understand what was happening before the bridge disintegrated around him. The Velen fleet fell into chaos. Without their admiral, without their flagship, the remaining ships had no coordination. Some tried to retreat. Others pressed forward blindly. None were prepared for what humanity had become. Gunnery Sergeant Kang Subin stood at her station on the cruiser Hallison, manually targeting enemy ships because the automated systems could not keep up with the rapidly changing battle. A hull breach had exposed her section to vacuum. Her suit was failing. She could feel the cold creeping into her bones, but her guns were still firing. "Come on," she growled through clenched teeth as another Velen destroyer crossed her sights. Just a little closer. Her shot struck true. The destroyer's reactor went critical, adding another expanding ball of fire to the chaos of the battle. Kang Subin smiled grimly and turned to find her next target. She was still firing when the cold finally took her. The Battle of Seoul lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 31 Velen warships had been destroyed. The survivors fled in disarray, their hyperspace jumps scattered and panicked. They carried with them stories of demons in human form, of ships that moved like predators, of a species that fought without fear and without mercy. On the bridge of the Baekdu, Captain Park Yuna allowed herself one moment of grief. So many had died. Munhajin, Kang Subin, hundreds of others whose names she had memorized, whose families she would have to face. The cost of victory was terrible, but they had won. "Send a message to Earth," she ordered, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Tell them the fleet is victorious. The enemy has been repelled." Across the galaxy, the news of Seoul spread like wildfire. Conquered species whispered to each other in secret, passing the story from world to world. The humans had won. The undefeatable Velen had been defeated. The impossible had happened on 100 worlds. In 1,000 hidden places, seeds of rebellion began to grow. The Crow, an insectoid species enslaved for 3,000 years, heard the news and began to sharpen their claws. The Mora, an aquatic people who had watched their ocean worlds be drained and polluted, heard the news and began to gather in the deep places. The Then, silicon-based beings who mined rare minerals for their Velen masters, heard the news and began to slow their work, just a little. Just enough. High Sovereign Kethmer sat alone in his throne room, reading the reports of the disaster. 40 ships. His finest admiral. Gone, all gone, to a species that should not even have discovered fire yet, for the first time in his very long life. Kethmer felt something he had never felt before. Fear. And somewhere in the Empire, a young analyst named Tillish read the same reports and felt something very different. Hope. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Seoul, and the galaxy had changed forever. The Velen Empire, once unshakable and absolute, was crumbling from within. The rebellions that had begun as whispers had grown into roars. The Krell rose first, their warrior swarms overwhelming the small Velen garrisons on their homeworld. The Mora followed, their submarines hunting Imperial ships through the depths of their ocean planets. The Then simply stopped working, and without the rare minerals they provided, Velen weapons factories ground to a halt. High Sovereign Kethmar raged and threatened and sent fleet after fleet to crush the uprisings, but there were too many fires to put out. Every ship sent to one rebellion was a ship not available to fight another. The Empire was bleeding from 1,000 wounds, and no amount of force could stop it. At the center of this storm stood humanity. The shipyards of Mars had not rested since the battle. Where once there had been 3 human warships, now there were 30. Where once humanity had been alone, now they stood at the head of a growing coalition. The Free Worlds Coalition, they called it. A gathering of species who had lived too long under Velen boots and were finally ready to stand up. Ambassador O'Yarin walked through the halls of the coalition's first joint station, built in orbit around a neutral world far from both Earth and Velen space. She was not a soldier. She had never fired a weapon in her life. But she understood something that warriors sometimes forgot. Wars were won not just with ships and guns, but with ideas and alliances. She stopped at a viewport and watched the ships gathering outside. Krell war swarms, their organic vessels pulsing with strange life. Mora submarines, adapted for space travel with elegant grace. Then cargo haulers, bringing the resources that kept the coalition running. And at the center, human cruisers standing watch over them all. It is beautiful, is it not? O'Yarin turned to find a Krell diplomat standing beside her. The insectoid creature's mandibles clicked as it spoke through a translated device. Yes, she agreed. Beautiful and terrifying. So many different species working together. It should not be possible. And yet here we are, the Krell said. Because of your people. You know, when we first heard of the Battle of Sol, we did not believe it. The Velen, defeated? By newcomers? It sounded like a fantasy. But then we learned more about humanity. About your history. Our history is not something to be proud of, O'Yarin said softly. We spent most of it fighting each other. Exactly. The Krell's compound eyes seemed to gleam. You survived your own worst nature. You learned to unite despite your differences. When we realized that, we understood something important. If humans could overcome themselves, perhaps they could help us overcome the Velen. The liberation of the Krell homeworld had come 3 months ago. Admiral Park Yuna, promoted after the Battle of Sol, had led the combined fleet that broke the Velen occupation. It had been brutal. The Velen had fought with the desperation of those who knew their empire was dying. But in the end, they had fallen. Now the Krell High Matriarch had requested a meeting with the human admiral. O'Yarin had come to observe, to ensure that diplomacy followed in victory's wake. She found Admiral Park standing on the bridge of the Baekdu, still serving as her flagship, despite the newer and larger ships available. The admiral looked tired. The past year had aged her in ways that went beyond simple time. Ambassador, Park Yuna greeted her. The High Matriarch is waiting. Admiral, before we go, I need to ask you something. The Matriarch will want to know why. Why did humanity choose to fight? Why did you help us? Park Yuna was silent for a long moment. Then she walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. When I was a child, she said, my grandmother told me stories of our country's history. Korea has been invaded many times by empires that wanted our land, our resources, our people. We were conquered, occupied, told that our culture was worthless, our language forbidden, our identity erased. She turned to face O'Yarin. But we survived. We kept our language in secret. We taught our children who they really were. And when the chance came, we fought back. Not because we were sure we could win, but because some things are worth fighting for even if you lose. And now? Now we look at the stars and we see the same thing. Species being conquered. Cultures being erased. Peoples being told they are nothing. Admiral Park's voice hardened. We could not stop it on Earth, not for centuries. But out here? Out here we have a chance to do better. The meeting with the High Matriarch took place in a simple room, stripped of ceremony. The Crow leader was ancient by her species standards. Her carapace, scarred from battles fought long before humanity reached the stars. "Admiral Park," she said, her voice like wind through dry leaves. "My people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. But I must ask you a question that has troubled me since first contact. Why? You could have hidden, built your strength in secret, waited until you were certain of victory. Why did you choose to fight so soon?" Admiral Park met the matriarch's compound eyes without flinching. "Because we looked at the stars and saw suffering," she said. "And we decided that if we had the power to help, we had the responsibility to try." The High Matriarch was silent for a long moment. Then she made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "You humans are very strange," she said. "Most species fight for survival, for resources, for power. You fight for ideas, for strangers, for people you have never met." She rose from her seat and approached the Admiral. "Perhaps that is why you win." The war continued for another 5 years. The Velen Empire, stubborn to the end, refused to surrender even as world after world slipped from their grasp. High Sovereign Kethmer died in the final battle for Velen Prime, leading his remaining ships in a desperate last stand. He never stopped believing that the Empire would rise again. It never did. The Galactic Commonwealth was founded 10 years after the Battle of Sol. 2,000 worlds, 300 species, united not by conquest but by choice. Its headquarters orbited Earth, not because humans demanded it, but because every other member species insisted. The humans had started this. The humans had shown what was possible. It was only fitting that their world stand at the center of the new order. Admiral Park Yuna attended the founding ceremony, though she refused any official position in the new government. She had done her part, she said. It was time for others to build what she had helped create. She was not alone. Beside her stood representatives of every species in the Commonwealth. And in the crowd, watching quietly, was a former Velen analyst named Tillish. He had defected to the Coalition during the war, bringing with him intelligence that had saved countless lives. Now he served as an advisor, helping the Commonwealth understand the remnants of the empire it had replaced. "You know," Tillish said quietly, "I was the first one to notice your species. 8 years ago. I saw the signals from Sol and wrote a report recommending investigation. What happened?" Park Yuna asked. "My commander ignored it. He said humanity was not worth worrying about." Tillish made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I wonder sometimes what would have happened if he had listened. If the Empire had come to Sol earlier, before you were ready. We would have fought anyway," Park Yuna said simply. "We would have lost, but we would have fought." "Yes," Tillish agreed. "I believe you would have. That is what makes your species so terrifying, Admiral. Not your weapons, not your technology, your refusal to accept defeat even when defeat is certain." He shook his head. "The Empire never understood that. We saw your small ships and your primitive world, and we thought we knew everything we needed to know. We were very, very wrong." The memorial wall was unveiled that day, a monument to all those who had died in the war for freedom. Names were inscribed in every language of every species, millions of them. Each one a life given so that others might live free. At the very top, carved in Korean Hangul that had become a symbol of hope across the galaxy, were the words that had started everything. "The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Attack us again, and we will not be so gentle." Admiral Park stood before the wall for a long time, reading the names of those she had lost. Moon Hajin, Kang Subin, so many others. They had given everything, and in return, they had changed the galaxy. The stars no longer belonged to tyrants. The darkness between worlds no longer hid only conquest and cruelty. Something new had been born, something that had seemed impossible just a decade before Hope. And at the center of it all, a small blue world called Earth continued to orbit its unremarkable star. Its people looked up at the night sky, no longer wondering if they were alone, no longer afraid of what they might find among the stars. They had found their answer. And the answer was simple. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and terrors. But humanity would face it all, together, always together, because that was what humans did. They survived.